You are listening to SPN, the Sports Podcasting Network.
من هناك لشوارزنيجر
Ya lo hace, pierna derecha, directo al arco, golazo, golazo, golazo.
This is Soccer Today, live on SPN Radio, your new live show about the beautiful game in all its glory, with Duane, Rollins and Kevin Laramee. MLS, EPL, La Liga, Champions League, all is fair game. Powered by the Sports Podcasting Network. Visit us at sportspodcastingnetwork.com.
Good afternoon and welcome to Soccer Today. I'm Duane Rollins along with Kevin Laramee. Folks, I'm getting sick and tired of having to start shows by reflecting on world events outside the soccer world, but here we are again. Last night, of course, in Manchester, 22 dead, including many children. Terribly sad, and I know we have a lot of listeners in Manchester based on our stats, so stay safe, stay strong, stay united, all that good stuff. Joining us on the line is Rudi Schuller. I don't know if you guys want to quickly say anything about that or just jump right in.
Oh, I was just gonna quickly mention, Duane. That's what I was thinking about last night. Is I hope that everyone that listens to this from Manchester is okay, and I don't know what to say about those things anymore. So let's talk soccer.
All right, Rudi Schuller from Sporting News Goal. Hey, Rudi, how you doing?
Not too bad. Obviously, my thoughts are with all the people affected out there. I mean, there's nothing really I can add. You guys summed it up quite well. We're all stunned, but not surprised by this, and hopefully everyone can pull through.
Exactly. All right. Let's talk about something that usually does bring us a great deal of joy in this country, and that is our own cup competition. A cup competition started many years ago by the impetus of the fans itself, the Voyageurs Cup, a great tradition there. I haven't wrote an article this year explaining it, but there's lots of them out there. If you don't know the history, it is a fan-driven cup that was created when basically the governing body here in Canada wasn't doing anything itself to create a championship trophy for Canadian clubs to play for. The fans did it, and now many years later, it is what it is. And I think it always sort of warms my heart when I think back of those origin stories, Rudi. I know you were around in those days too. Rudi, let's start with Toronto, Ottawa. This is the first time this has happened. I want to call it the Ontario Derby, I guess, but it's not much of a rivalry just as of yet. Obviously, this is a massive underdog situation for the Fury, but is there anything that we should worry about if you're a TFC fan, that you should be excited about if you're a Fury fan? Is there any possibility of an upset in this?
Of course there is. I mean, the old cliche is that's why they play the game, right? And if you look at what Ottawa did last year against Vancouver in the first leg, anything's possible. This is a team that's going to be highly motivated. They know that they're going up against the juggernaut of Canadian soccer right now. TFC is arguably the juggernaut of North America, North of Mexico
Soccer,
right now. So they're going to be highly motivated in front of their own crowd. I'm expecting a larger than usual crowd for what they usually get up there at TD Place, just because of what they did last year against the Whitecaps. I believe they had the largest crowd of the season in that game. Of course, the Senators are playing, but that's a whole other story. But regardless, I think the crowd is going to be up for it. The team's going to be up for it. These are players that are all trying to prove that they're on this level. They're playing in the USL, which is, of course, is technically only one step down from MLS, but it's still a big step. These are guys that are playing to be noticed and for pride and all those wonderful cliche things that we do. I think there is an extra kind of bounce in the smaller team step when they play against the big dogs. So this is something that TFC knows that they can't go in overconfident. It's a group that kind of has faced this before, so I don't think they're going to. But if there's any kind of danger for TFC, it's overconfidence. It's expecting to go in there and getting a result, because you can't do that. You can't do that in these kind of cup competitions. We've seen it the world over, that this is something that the smaller teams get up for, especially the first leg where it's at home and they want to impress their own fans. So it's something I'm looking forward to, especially the fact that these teams have never faced each other in any kind of competition whatsoever, not even in preseason or anything like that. We've seen TFC2 take on the Fury, of course, in regular competition and in preseason, but they've never faced the big TFC. So it's it's a unique, another unique event going on in Canada soccer.
It's really unfortunate about the Senators, because it happened in their qualifying round too, with the Oilers playing when they were up in Edmonton as well, and that of course detracted from that as well. But you can't really, if you're going to face hockey in this country, you might as well face it head on. So hopefully there's a good crowd out there. I've heard that there's about 200 purchased tickets in the away section as well. So it should be a good atmosphere, Rudi. You're around the team a little bit, quite a bit at times. So what is your take in terms of TFC and their motivation in this competition? There's a lot of narrative about them, looking to prove a point, about them having that Champions League spot taken away. Do you get the anticipation that the players truly buy into that and that they are truly motivated to go out there and prove something in this?
Yeah, I think so. I think the ones that were around last year, that's most of them. They were told that they were going to be in the Champions League. They were told they won the Champions League spot along with the Voyageurs Cup. There's two things you're trying to win in this tournament, and those are the two things. And to kind of have one taken away through no fault of their own, it's kind of puts a little bit of a chip on their shoulder. They've been making a bunch of noise about it, not necessarily the players, but through the organization. And now it's time to show that this is deservedly their spot. I do think it's a little bit unfair that they got the spot taken away. They won that spot fair and square. I know that CONCACAF, of course, changed a lot under the feet of the CSA, but I think there was probably a better solution. They probably could have done this, winner plays the winner of the next one next year, and because they've already given TFC the spot. They already told them that they won the spot, and then they took it away. But it gives TFC a little bit extra motivation in a game that in a series that they probably would have taken a little bit lighter. I was talking about overconfidence before, but they do know that they're facing a USL team, and they could probably not have to go out 100%. But now I think this kind of gives them a little bit more incentive, and just looking at who they traveled with. A lot of the big guns are going with them. So I'm expecting a lot of rotation for the game, but I am also expecting a lot of the regulars as well. So it's one of these things where I think that TFC wants to put this competition to bed as soon as they can. And it starts with Ottawa. They don't want to have to play that one game play in August where if they were to lose this competition, then they'd have to face the winner. I just don't think they want to chance it. This is something that they wanted to do. They wanted to get into CONCACAF Champions League with this team, with the way that they've built it now. They feel that they can have a legitimate shot, as legitimate a shot as any MLS team has had. So this is, it's just another one of those things that they want to win. They set out at the beginning of last year. They said they wanted to win the Supporters Shield. They wanted to win the MLS Cup. They wanted to win the Canadian Championship. And they won one of the three last year. They have a possibility of winning all three this year. So I think they're going to take it as seriously as possible, while also being pragmatic and knowing that there is a game in 3 days.
I agree with you, Rudi, but I was talking about another works earlier today about it. What could be interesting example if Montreal wins the Voyageurs Cup, and then there's a one playoff game that the winner goes to the CONCACAF Champions League. Like the atmosphere, the tension, the intensity. It's a one-off game that's done in the league, and it's for like an important prize. I don't know. That game got me salivating a bit, but I do agree it's not necessarily fair for Toronto.
Yeah, I mean, for the rest of the observers outside of TFC, outside of that locker room, it sounds great. It's kind of like a mini, our version of the mini, like the CONCACAF Cup between USA and Mexico, between the two Gold Cup winners that they had a couple of years ago to get into the Confederations Cup and do that kind of thing. So, of course, that the one-off, it's almost like our own cup final, right? Even our own cup final here is a two-legged cup final. So to have a one-off, that'd be amazing. But if you're TFC, you absolutely do not want that. You don't want to risk everything just for 90 minutes of thrilling in the stands and for the fans and whatnot. I think they want to put this to bed as soon as possible. Of course, the other teams would rather see it go to that game. But speaking from the TFC perspective, and just from what I've gathered from them and the way they're talking, is that this is something they want to get done as soon as possible. So that does not include that game, unfortunately. But if it does happen, yeah, it'll be something we'll talk about, and it'll be something that'll be very very exciting for soccer as a whole in this country.
Yeah, in life, there's not a lot of certainties. Rudy, we know taxes, we know about mortality of human beings, and we know that CONCACAF will complicate things. CONCACAF will CONCACAF, and the CONCACAF Champions League format has been really complicated for the next 2 years. And is the format change maybe take some lackluster away from a tournament to get into there, because it's almost like not even a tournament, it's just an knockout stage. And I don't know, does it lose the interest of some fans maybe to the Voyagers Cup?
I don't think so. I still think fans of the Voyagers Cup, fans of the Canadian Championship, fans of the Canadian teams, they want to see in there and going up against the big boys from Mexico and the U.S. and Costa Rica and whatnot. And yes, it's they split up. It's basically two tournaments now. They have the I can't remember what they call the first one. It's the CONCACAF League something. I don't know. And then winners of that go on to the CONCACAF Champions League proper, which happens after February. So it's basically it's a reorganization to allow the smaller teams more competitive games. It's kind of what they're doing at the national team level as well with the CONCACAF League of Nations or whatever they're calling it, getting rid of all the friendlies. It's something that, with CONCACAF, most of the membership are small, tiny countries that don't really, they don't really have a proper shot at World Cup qualification, at the Gold Cup and whatnot. They don't really have the budget, the population, whatever the case may be, to go up against the bigger boys of CONCACAF. So it's also reflected at the club level. So this is just another way to get everyone involved within the entire confederation. And I think it's going to filter through. I think, you're going to see the best of those smaller nations go up and go up against each other and then move on to the CONCACAF Champions League proper. So maybe it gives them a little bit more practice at these bigger games and a little bit more experience at high pressure games, so that when they are facing up against the Mexican teams, the MLS teams, they can fare a little bit better. So maybe it brings the level of competition upwards. But I think as long as Canada's in it, they want to have. I think the fans and we certainly wants to see our representative go in there and do their best. So. The group stage was kind of a farce before anyway. It's just the way it was set up. You saw MLS teams and Mexican teams kind of throw their B teams in there and still usually win handily against the smaller clubs. So I think this kind of weeds that out. It lets the bigger clubs focus on their leagues for the time being until the early part of the year, and that's when they can focus on the Champions League. So it kind of helps out both sides, both the bigger and the smaller clubs. It gets rid of the fixture congestion for the bigger clubs, and it gives more fixtures to the smaller clubs. So it looks like, on paper at least, it'll be a best of both worlds scenario. But now we have to see it play out, and I think Canada is going to be better for it, just being part of that, the bigger part of the Champions League, the Champions League proper.
Yeah, well, and I suspect the Canadian team will be seeded in that round, so they'll get a little bit of a lighter touch in the round of 16. There's also, I think, the possibility once the Canadian Premier League is up and running, that they might be able to wiggle their way into a spot in that earlier round for the champion of that. And that's, I'm hoping for that. But Rudi, I'm going to ask you a question that's a little bit about the Voyagers Cup, because there's a tie in there, but a little bit about TFC right now, and that has to do with this weird sort of thing where they can't kick penalties. They can't take penalties right now. And of course, the Voyagers Cup, that might be their Achilles heel in this competition. If someone can get them to kicks at the end, and the hangover of MLS Cup might be hanging over them. Is there something there, or is this just a weird stretch of coincidence where, just unfortunately the players that have taken these have not hit them right at the time, or is there something deeper happening now?
I don't think there's anything deeper happening. There's a lot of PTSD going on about within the TFC fan base about penalty kicks just because of the way MLS Cup ended. But if you take a look at the way the MLS Cup ended, both keepers made the same number of saves. They each only saved one. It just came down to a crossbar. And both teams missed penalties as well. So it came down to a single crossbar from Justin Morrow, who's the kick takers anyway. So it's I don't think it's anything to worry about. The two guys that have been taking the penalties predominantly for TFC generally put them away. Sebastian Jovinko, you kind of bet your house on them that he would put them away. And then goalkeepers finally started diving to the right way and figuring out how to stop him, because he was placing it in the exact same spot every single time, but putting it perfectly in there. So whenever he just kind of missed by an inch or two, that gave the goalkeepers a kind of a leg up to make the stop. So we saw what happened when he took his last one. He went the other way. He went right down the middle with the goalkeeper diving to where he usually goes. And with Josie Altidore, generally he goes for power over precision, and we've seen him kind of go for precision over the past couple times that he's missed. And I think he'll change it up as well. But there's those are only two guys. There's other guys on the team that can kick them. I think Victor Vasquez could probably do a job. Benoit Cheroux could probably do something. There are guys there that can slot them in if those the two main guys don't do it. But I feel like those two guys have proven enough that over the years they can take those kicks, and it's just something that I think will sort itself out as long as they put some time in training. So yeah, I mean, if you're planning for penalty kicks, then I think you kind of got it backwards anyway. I think you should be playing to win in regulation anyway, or within extra time, because penalty kicks don't really come into play until you played 120 minutes anyway.
Yeah, fair enough. Rudi, let's turn our attention to the other tie in this. Of course, the Impact and Vancouver. That's a rivalry that gets a little underappreciated. Sometimes it goes way back, of course, into the USL A League, whatever the hell they were calling it that week, for years. But what do you take on that one? Who do you think of those two clubs is going to be more serious about this game?
Oh, that's a tough one. I mean, historically, you'd have to say Montreal, right? Just because of the Champions League runs that they've had over the years, and the big crowds and the big buzz that they've been able to create. I mean, basically, they convinced MLS to go to Montreal based on a Champions League run. Of course, there were other factors, but that was kind of the thing that pushed them over the edge. Back in 2009. So you'd think historically that's the organization that values the Voyageurs Cup and getting into Champions League a little bit more. But I think that now that Vancouver's also gotten a taste of it, I think they also, it's just another kind of notch on the bedpost for them. In the league over the past few years, or really ever, but of course they've been a playoff team, but not really a convincing one. So I think this is just another avenue for success for the Whitecaps. So in a stretch where they really haven't had much, I think both teams now are kind of, they came into the league this year playing a bit poorly, to be quite honest. But both of them have turned things around slightly over the past few weeks. I think obviously the Whitecaps have turned things around more than the Impact have. So if it's going to come down to form, I think the Whitecaps would have to be favored. But again, it all depends on what kind of roster they put out there and what kind of impetus they put to win this series. Because in the past, I think, like I keep mentioning, the past it seems like the Impact has taken it more seriously. So we only have history to go on, and at this point, I'd say the Impact would probably take it a little bit more seriously. But the Whitecaps have surprised me over the last few weeks, and maybe they'll be able to bring their league form into the Cup.
Well, which brings me to exactly where I wanted to go, Rudi. The form of the Whitecaps have been surprising lately, and even when it looked like the panic button was pushed on and it was flashing red, I was a little bit more calm because I was seeing some great chemistry being built. Hurtados, the Mesquita, the Breck Shea coming as a super sub, especially Montero stamping his influence on this team. Vancouver was better than the beginning of the season. How dangerous can Vancouver be at home tonight?
Well, I think they have to be favored, right? Just because of the way we've been playing. And they generally, like most teams in MLS and most teams around the world, tend to play better at home. They're more familiar with the turf there. They're more familiar with the strange bounces that it has, and they didn't have to travel. They didn't have to travel the entire length of Canada, basically, which the Impact did have to do. So, of course, they would have to be favored. And I think what Carl Robinson was trying to build up there, I think we're starting to see it now. We're starting to see a very Latin-style attack. Of course, they've got a very Latin-heavy team, but the attack is kind of, it's taken a while to gel. Montero wasn't exactly a perfect fit from the beginning, but his poaching skills kind of, let him off the hook a little bit because, he's kind of a fox in the box no matter what's happening. But I think Christian Bolaños has been playing excellently. He's been the primary service provider for Montero, and I think the two of them have kind of gelled the way that Carl Robinson has wanted him to over the past few weeks. And Christian Teixeira has been playing well too. He just scored a screamer of a goal on the weekend against Sporting Kansas City. He's another one of these small guys that's really hard to track because he's so tiny and so shifty and so low to the ground. He uses his center of gravity very well, but he can also strike a ball very cleanly. And the three of them, they're kind of a three-headed monster. And then you add in, like you said, Brett Shea, who looked, and I'm not even a mince word, he looked awful to begin his Whitecaps career. But he since coming back from that knee injury, he's looked effective. He scored a couple of goals. He plays a lot more direct than the three guys I mentioned before, and I think that adds a different dimension. And then you could add Alphonso Davies to that as well, because the kid is learning how to combine and how to play well, because play well in that kind of system, because he's also a very direct player as well. So they can kind of hit you with different looks at different attacks, and I think that's all coming together now. So it's something that the Whitecaps are going to be looking to exploit, and something that the Impact are going to have to be very wary of, because defensively the Impact haven't looked very good this season at all. In spurts they have, but for the most part they haven't been impressive. And on the road, it's just another layer that they're going to have to deal with, because I do think that the Whitecaps are favored to win this leg, and that I think that the Whitecaps will get something positive out of this leg. But going back to Stade Saputo is another story.
Another layer to this is the absence of 5-starter from Saturday's game and Louis Belanga yet. So you have Piatti, Fisher, Donadel, Oyongo, and Zamali not even traveling with the team. We have seen Rudi, the Impact, play without Donadel over the last few weeks before his return on Saturday, and it wasn't pretty. Can Montreal get blown out tonight?
Yeah, but I don't think they will. Of course, now that I say that, they will. No, but I don't think it's going to happen. I don't think that Vancouver is going to go out and look to destroy them. And I don't know if Vancouver has that kind of. I mentioned that they're gelling now and they're kind of putting things together, but I don't think they're quite there where they're gonna blow out teams. Yes, I know they looked quite impressive against Sporting KC. It was a Sporting KC team that had played midweek and like Montreal had rested a lot of starters, but I still feel like they were at a more of a disadvantage because the guys that did play had played. A lot of them had played in the midweek, so it's one of those things where I feel like games between these two teams are always tight anyway. Games between all the Canadian teams in MLS are generally tight. There's obviously exceptions, and there have been exceptions in the Voyageurs Cup, of course. But over the last couple of years, I think that it's been very equal. Even if there has been teams that have rise to the top, I think it's been equal in the individual games. So I don't foresee it happening. It's definitely possible, especially the laissez-faire squad that I think the Impact have put together. But I don't blame them. I don't blame them for leaving Piatti and Zamali and some of these other guys behind, just because traveling that far for a midweek game ahead of a weekend MLS game is not the best strategy. And I think they feel that they can take care of business at Stade Saputo against the Whitecaps in the next leg. So I think they're going to come out and they're going to be a little bit more defensive than they usually are. And I just mentioned that their defense isn't the greatest, but I feel like they're going to put a little bit more effort into that side of the game than they usually do. I think it's going to be a cagey match, because I feel like Mauro Biello is a bit of a better tactician than Carl Robinson has been over the past couple of years when they've both been head coaches. I think he's been more flexible than Carl Robinson, although I think for Robinson's credit, he's been a little bit more flexible over the last few weeks with his roster getting bigger and more varied, and the looks that we've seen now, it's a little bit more varied in attack. But I do think that Biello is a better tactician at this point, and I think he's going to have something a little bit of a surprise in store for the Whitecaps. So I think we're going to see a cagey game at BC Place, but I could be wrong. We could see the form come into play, the recent form, and the Whitecaps put this whole thing to bed in the first game. But I would be very, very surprised if that happens.
All right, real quickly, there has been a change in the format in the sense that the teams are required to play 3 Canadian starters for each game this time. So do you think there's an advantage inherent for any of the 3 clubs or 4 clubs still left in this competition here, Rudi, or is that pretty much a wash?
I'd say it's a wash, just because the amount of Canadians each team has on their roster is pretty much the same. I think Ottawa has a little bit of advantage over TFC right now, just because they've played in this competition already, so they know who they're going to play as the 3 Canadians, or I think they actually played 4 or 5 last time. TFC, they have several Canadians that have played in MLS, but in this year, but a lot of them haven't played together, and a lot of them haven't seen time recently. Of course, we've seen Raheem Edwards and Tosin Ricketts get a lot of the time. Osorio's been out with injury, a heart condition. And then you have the younger guys that have barely gotten any time at all. So it's going to be a bit of a wild card whether they can all gel quickly. But again, they're playing against a weaker opponent than the Whitecaps or Impact would have to worry about. Those two teams, neither of them have very high Canadian content in MLS at least. So it's going to be very interesting. It basically comes down to who has the better Canadian bench warmers in that series. I think that right now I'm not even sure. I don't even know because yes, of course, the Impact have been playing Bernier and Balou quite often, and I think that is an advantage for them. But that's only two guys. Of course they're going to play Crepeau, which is another one. But how is he going to be able to step up? I feel like he will be, but you don't know until the ball is kicked. And on the Vancouver side, who are they going to play? Because a lot of their Canadians haven't started a Canadian in 5 games in MLS. They've played Davies, who I'm not even 100% sure counts as a Canadian yet in these competition rules. But then they got a bunch of other guys. Marcel de Jong barely played at all. He's a veteran, so I think he'll be able to step in. But then there's other guys that have barely seen a minute. Marco Bustos hasn't seen a minute in MLS this year. A couple of the younger kids. It's going to be tough. I think I feel like it's going to come down to which of these kids can step up quicker. So, although I do feel like the Impact has a slight advantage just because they played those two Canadians they play on a regular basis that will probably play tonight as well.
All right, Rudi, what do you have going on at the Sporting News right now that you want to promote?
Well, it's of course we'll be keeping an eye on all these games, and then of course we got as at the Sporting News we look at the entire world. So of course we got coming up is the Europa League final. So lots of preview content for that, and then of course I'll be writing up this stuff tonight and tomorrow. So we'll take a look for all that.
All right, that Europa League final, of course, taking on a different emotional toner. Absolutely. Now that the incidents have happened of last night. All right, Rudi, we thank you for your time as always, and we'll talk soon.
I'll talk to you later, guys.
You are listening to Soccer Today, live on SPN Radio. Visit sportspodcastingnetwork.com for more.
Welcome back. Thanks again to Rudi. Yeah, the V Cup is something that I mentioned it in the preamble to one of my questions there, Kevin, and we talk about it a lot. And I assume most people do know the story, but real quickly, as I said in that, this trophy came around several years ago in the early part of the first decade of this century, which I never know what to call. The aughts, I guess, is what people have settled on. But at any rate, it came part in the early
2000s.
Yeah,
there we go.
Exactly. Like I said, it was a different CSA at the time, and it's a CSA that a lot of people still assume is there, but it was a much less competent one, and it was a much less ambitious one. This is before MLS was even a twinkle in the eye, so to speak. And basically, the fans got sick of waiting for the CSA to produce a professional club competition. There were existing club teams playing in the American leagues. They pitched in $5, $10, $20, maybe $50 if somebody had a good job, and they bought this trophy. And years later, when MLS stepped in, they quite smartly, and I think Paul Byrne was involved in this a great deal at the time. Once they learned the history of it, they stepped up and said, "Well, we already have the trophy, and now we'll go." Which is why a lot of us get very protective of the name Voyageurs Cup. Because we'll hear Canadian Championships or, God help us, Canada Cup, which makes all of this crazy.
Even worse, Amway Canadian Championship. Yeah.
I am not opposed to giving a title sponsor a single reference, but yeah, the cup is the Voyageurs Cup. It's not the Canada Cup. I draw my line there. That's something that I feel that the clubs could do a better job of explaining the history to the players so that they don't make that slip up, because they often do. It's often the non-Canadians that will say Canada Cup or whatever, and that's how they think of it, and I get it. But
the name of the trophy, the name of the trophy is the Voyageurs Cup.
Yeah, and if you're Victor Vasquez probably doesn't have a freaking clue what the Voyageurs are, but that's okay. You can teach him
Traveler?
in 5 minutes.
Like a traveler? Why the traveler? Why the traveler? Because our country's huge and it takes a long time to get there.
Exactly. So that is going today. We're going to talk a little bit about MLS in San Diego, and they're getting their Soccer City initiative on the ballot to end the show in a minute. But let's continue our Voyageurs Cup conversation for now, Kevin, and just get your perspective and my perspective on what we'll see. I guess we'll start with Toronto. Look, it's very difficult to see how the Fury can get a result in this. As Rudi said, you play the games, anything can happen, balls around, all those sort of cliches. But the task that they're up against, it really would rely upon a 1 in 100 sort of situation for them to win one of these 2 games. What is a victory? And I'll ask you first, what is a victory for the Fury in this series? A realistic victory for them?
A win at home, a goal, an advantage, not getting blown out. Those things are wins. That's what it's all about tonight, right? If they can get the lead and maybe squeeze a result, either a draw or something, to give them a chance, to give them hope heading into the second game. Maybe that's what you want, to keep the dream alive for one more week.
Yeah, and look, it's going to be a weird crowd too. And the Fury fans, this isn't like, a TFC Impact game or something where, there's a visceral sort of dislike of the clubs between the fans, right? Ottawa Fury fans, a lot of them are TFC fans. They have Impact fans in that fan base as well. They sort of have an MLS team, and I'm sure that the Fury fans that cheer for the Impact are going to be happy to show up tonight and cheer against TFC. But there's going to be a lot of them that they stand beside week in, week out that are torn, and that's going to be a different situation and not one that we've really seen. I don't think ever, because these 2 clubs have never played before. So that's going to make things a little bit different. I think what a victory is for the Fury. And look, I acknowledge all the cliches that Rudi rolled out, that the ball is round and anything can happen once the game kicks off. But realistically, if you look at the talent disparity between these 2 clubs and you look at the form disparity between these 2 clubs, the Fury aren't exactly tearing USL up right now. TFC is a 100-1 favorite here, right? Like this is a massive disparity in terms of the talent mix. So I think what a victory is for them might be just showing well, might be grabbing the hearts of a few of those fans that do show up tonight and are sort of torn about that and going, you know what, I'm going to support my local team a little bit more. So like you say, if it's close, I think best case scenario is they pull off a draw of some kind. Maybe even best case scenario might be that they force TFC's hand a little bit and force them to bring out some of the big guns in the second half. Because I anticipate what Toronto will do is that they will bring some of those stars, guys like Vasquez, guys like Altidore, they'll bring them, but they'll sit them on the bench to start with the hope that the younger players, that the reserve players can get the job done. And then if they need to bring them on, they can. So maybe that's the victory, getting the big guys on the field, Kevin. All right, Let's turn the attention to the other one. What are your hopes as an Impact supporter or Impact follower heading into this one? Because it's got to seem like pray for the draw right now, right?
The draw or like a goal. If you look at the history of this tournament, Montreal have come back from deficit in the second leg home. And there's the famous Toronto 6-0 win in Montreal. They lost 2-0 on the road. Big supporter outcry. Oh, we are taking the cup seriously. What about you? Was said in the stands. 6 goals were produced, and 1 and 2 and 5 and 6. And it was kind of a crazy night. And I'm not expecting this necessarily to happen, but yes, 5 starters of Saturday's games are not traveling to the game on tonight. They haven't traveled in the weekend to Vancouver. It can leave Montreal in a difficult situation. A goal, a result, or just maybe 1 or even 2 goal down would not be too bad. One of that is the worst case scenario. But if you manage to have a shot to play your strong team at home and come back from that deficit, 2 goals is not necessarily out of reach. So either a 2-goal deficit, a goal, a win, of course, or a draw would be perfect. But if you score a goal and you lose 2-1 tonight, it's not the end of the world.
No, for sure. And as you say, that certainly the 6-0 game rings a bell. There's another Voyageurs Cup semifinal situation where Montreal came from behind to win the second leg after losing to Toronto in the past 2. So it's not unheard of. It's hard to believe that 6-0 game was 4 years ago. It seems like a different lifetime ago, Kevin. But at any rate,
I had a lot more hair. At least my hair was a lot more consistent back then.
Yeah, 4 years, man, long time. Anyway, I remember watching that here, and by the time the fourth goal went in, we stopped watching it because that was just kind of the night it was. All right, moving on from that though, the Whitecaps. Look, I do think that they're still a little burnt by how the last Voyageurs Cup ended. They really have, I don't think they blame anyone for it, but they do think that they probably got a lot of bad luck. And I mean, I do think that the time, if we think back on it, that there's some people that feel that the whistle should have blown already for the end of the game, that it was a little bit over the time allotted in stoppage, although you can make an argument either way on that one. So I think the Whitecaps will be a little bit more motivated, but Rudi brought up the issue, that last question he answered, in terms of where they're going to find that Canadian talent from. And that could become, I think I wish they would have went further in terms of where they went with the Canadian quota on this, but I really am refreshed and glad that they have added that wrinkle to the competition, because I think you do need to have a certain representation of Canadians out there to make this a true Canadian championship.
Yeah, of course. I think it's interesting. And if you're looking at example Montreal, Balou and Bernier are playing because they deserve to play, not like the CFL where you have to play Canadians where sometimes they're not necessarily to the equal of our American counterpart, right? So it's fun to see Canadians play. It's fun to see Canadians play tonight, but especially in Montreal's case, to see Canadians play like Jackson Amel, like Balou, like Bernier, because they deserve to.
Yeah, well, that's the ultimate goal for that. But we won't get into that chicken and egg argument today. Let's get a quick prediction on tonight's games and maybe the tie as well overall. So how do you see Ottawa, Toronto finishing tonight, and who do you see winning that tie ultimately?
Could get ugly over two legs. Let's say maybe 3-0 tonight for Toronto, and then in Toronto, I don't know, another few goals, maybe 6-0 in home and away series for Toronto or something similar to that.
All right, I'll do my predictions back to back at the end. So give me your shout on the Vancouver Montreal game.
Montreal gets the job done, second leg at home. I think Montreal can get a goal tonight on the road, and then put himself in a situation where a victory like 2-0 or something will give him the ticket to the final of the Voyageurs Cup for this year.
All right, I like you. I'm trying to be delicate with the Ottawa, and I don't want to, and I could be wrong. I mean, things happen, but I could see Toronto scoring at least 3 goals tonight. They tend to be scoring goals for fun now anyway. So let's say 3-1. Let's give Ottawa a goal. Maybe they let the focus down at some point. And then the second leg in Toronto, I don't think is going to be very pretty. Let's give Toronto 4 goals that night and Ottawa none. So we're going with a 7-1 out of the final there, which
it gets ugly quickly, right? It can turn around quickly. Like we've seen Toronto, like we've seen St. Ricketts himself put 2 in like 5 minutes to change the entire complexion of a game against Major League Soccer competition. So yeah, could turn ugly quickly. It might stay beautiful for like 60 minutes. Then the wall would be hit.
Yeah. And look, I think we're a ways off having, this Voyageurs Cup competition might not become truly, you might not completely grab the attention of the casual until there's an upset in it. And I don't know when that's going to happen. Maybe when the Canadian Premier League starts and there's just more games that we will see, and they'll probably have single knockouts at that point. I suspect they'll move to a single knockout format somewhere down the line very quickly once the Canadian Premier League teams come in. But then we might see an upset. We might see one of these lower seeded teams advance over an MLS team. And that's when it will really get the juice in that. In terms of the second series, I actually could see this one as a pretty much even Steven kind of series. And I'm going to call this one to penalties with a pair of 2-0 home wins for both of the home teams. Then it goes to penalties or extra time at any rate in Montreal. And in the extra time in Montreal, I'm going to give just a slight edge to the Impact simply because they're at home at that point and they'll have the extra 30 minutes to try and figure it out in this extra time. So that's my prediction there. So we're looking at a Toronto-Montreal Voyageurs Cup finals to have a little bit of a renewal for the Eastern Conference final. And that's not going to get hyped at all now, is it?
No, not at all.
All right. Let's end the show with a little bit of talk of this San Diego stuff. It's an interesting sort of chatter that came out of there. There's an article from a guy that's not exactly, well, he's known as an MLS basher, basically, as someone who doesn't believe in the league or the league structure, has written something in the past where he called it a pyramid scheme. So let's keep that in mind when we're analyzing this. But the claim came out that the investment pitch to the folks that are backing what they're calling Soccer City, which is something everyone seems to want to be called Soccer City nowadays. But the Soccer City proposal, which would build a stadium adjacent to where the Chargers played, so they'd play in the Chargers stadium until such time as they had the soccer-specific stadium built. That the pitch to this is that this team will, quote unquote, never make money, and will cost $150 million, which we know it was going to cost anyways in terms of the expansion fee, and never make money and probably lose between $4 and $12 million each year, indefinitely. That doesn't exactly inspire confidence, but as it is with any sort of MLS,
he's not 100% wrong though.
Like, yeah, maybe it depends on how you move the money.
No, true, but look at Montreal. They're at deficit every year still, a few millions, closer to 4 than to the 12. I agree, but there's still like a deficit, and depending on the amount of season tickets you have, Montreal's close to 10,020, and that's unfortunate. But I'm just talking about what I am surrounded by, so I don't know about the other cities as much. But example, even if your stadium is full, you're going to be close to break it even in the end of the season. But to make profit, it is difficult. So you might be wrong in the indefinite part, but it's true though. There might be a loss in the first 5 to 10 years in the few millions a year, but it's cost of operation to have it like at a certain level too. And you expect that eventually down the road with Major League Soccer expansion, that those profit and those revenues and TV rights and all those things that would make it easier to get closer to breaking even and in the profit would come easier as well. So he's wrong in is indefinite, and the saying 4 to 12 where it might be closer to 4 and closer to 2 than to 12. But pragmatically, if you're willing to get to that ownership and to get to a team at that level, you might have a loss for the first few years.
Yeah, there's a couple of things when you talk about MLS finances. Is one, we're never quite sure how much the sum factor is factored in. Soccer United marketing plays a significant role in terms of the revenues that all these teams receive, and often they will remove that equation from any sort of reporting of their profits and losses, and that can even things out a lot more than I think the MLS owners are always willing to do. But even beyond that, owners in any professional sports often lose money. The way that they're looking to gain money from the investment is a long play, right? They look for the value of the franchise to increase. So when the time comes to sell what they purchased for, and let's look at that. I'll stay in my own backyard for a second here. MLSE bought TFC for $10 million. They'd sell them for a hell of a lot more now. And that's where you make your money. Investing in any professional sports. TFC would probably go for $200 million now, and that's a crazy investment. But you're never going to get that kind of growth again in this league, but that would be the hope.
And this is a low ball estimate. Just look at the expansion fee that it costs to get into a Major League Soccer now. It's what, between 100 and 150, we imagine. So that in Montreal was 40, and even in that 40, Montreal was included the investment that was made to expand San Saputo to give Montreal a chance to get to that 40 million easier, right? So we're talking about just in 2017, 2012, 5 years of existence, because it was announced the year before, right? So in 5-6 years of existence, the Montreal impact value just with the cost of expansion has been from 40 to 150, and that's without the footprint and the impact of the brand and the brand's value in the entire world, right? With the Drogba, the Vaio, the Mali, Piatti. So yeah, in that sense, you're right. That investment, it might be a loss of money on a yearly basis, but just the value of the team has grown more than double over the years.
Yeah, precisely. Emma, I still maintain, and maybe we'll end it with this one here, but I maintain that San Diego will be a slam dunk if they can get this approved. I believe that. I believe that MLS likes the demographics of that city. They like the sort of history of supporting soccer in that city. I think they like to be in markets where they can reach more of the Mexican-American audience. I think that they view, that they're losing a bit of that area to the Zulus a little bit, so that might be able to bring a few people back that don't want to deal with the border crossing, to go watch games. So I think that there's a lot of potential in San Diego, but it will come down to whether they accept this proposal, which they did get on a ballot. And we've talked about this a few times already in the recent days, is that once things get in the ballot, not everything's going to be a slam dunk necessarily, but it is certainly a step in that right direction.
Yeah, no, and you can get the derby factor with LA and the two teams in LA at that moment. And no, it could be it could be the fourth team in California that makes the entire thing work even better, right? I don't know. I think it has a lot of potential, and I think if it's done properly, maybe that's where Chicharito ends up. I don't know. Well, there's something that I expect that it could be done properly to have a good club in San Diego. The Shockers. I don't know if you remember back that, Brian. And I would love to see some teal in Major League Soccer. So maybe you go that route. Maybe you call them the Golden Seals. And you
I don't know if Shockers is exactly the name you're looking for, because that might have a different Urban Dictionary meaning that we'll just leave well enough alone. But
I'm naive, so I don't even know what you mean, and I don't even want to know, because I'm just talking about the old soccer team. So that's all.
Yes. There you go. The Sockers. I was thinking Shocker. Oh my God, my mind's in the gutter. Yes.
The Shockers. Yeah, no, the San Diego Shockers used to be the team in the A League or something, indoor. I don't know.
Yes. All right. Well, yeah. If you want to go that one later, you go ahead. I'm not going to explain it on the air. All right, Kevin. On that note, any final thoughts on what's been sort of a bittersweet day in terms of the issues overseas, but certainly an exciting day in the sense that we get our Voyageurs Cup back at the semifinal stage tonight, and that's something that we're looking forward to. Any final thoughts?
No, Duane, and you can follow Duane on Twitter at 24th Minute and myself at Kev Laramee. Tomorrow, 10 a.m., a big guest, a Canadian soccer legend on the show, 10 a.m. Eastern, 7 a.m. Pacific. Tomorrow, Soccer Today. Tonight, 10 p.m., Voyageurs Cup, Montreal, Vancouver, in Vancouver, and before that, Ottawa, and Toronto FC on TSN, on RDS. And as always, until tomorrow, have a great soccer. You were listening to SPN, the Sports Podcasting Network. Visit us, sportspodcastingnetwork.com.